This is Pawprint, an animal rescue community, episode 15. I'm Nancy Ree.
I'm Harold Ree.
Today's guest is Rebekah Nemethy, host of My Rescue Rocks, a terrific animal rescue podcast. She just started her second season, so we asked Rebekah to join us today to share her story. If you want to learn more about Rebekah and My Rescue Rocks, go to our show notes at thisispawprint.com/15. That's the number 15.
Rebekah talks about a lot of different people. She mentions Joe Nip, who rescues Robert the Pit Bull, Nina Huang with her greyhound Apollo, and most importantly, fellow pet photographer Lisa Prince Fischler, founder of Heartspeak, and someone who would have a big influence on Rebekah's life.
I wanted to start a pet photography business because I've always loved animals. I've always had animals in my life. We had cats, we had dogs, I had hamsters and horses, everything. When I finally decided to launch my photography business, I went to an event called Woofstock. And when I went there, there was another pet photographer there, and that kind of freaked me out because I had met some mean photographers that were really competitive and didn't really take kindly to new people. So I was kind of afraid I was on her turf, and she introduced herself, and she totally pretty much changed everything because she told me about an organization that she started called Heartspeak. And it was basically an organization of artists and photographers that volunteer their services to help animals. So when I started diving deeper into that, I realized that there's way more stuff going on out there that I never knew about. Puppy mills and animals being euthanized like an hour away from my house. I had no idea that all that was going on. I contacted a few rescues until I eventually found one that wanted me to help, and I started volunteering my pet photography, and I became a member of Heartspeak. Little by little, you just start to meet people, and you start to follow more people on Facebook, make more friends, and then you start to see all of these animals that are urgent and need foster homes, and kind of dove into that, and I started fostering too.
So how long have you been doing the pet photography?
I am a professional photographer, but most of it is product photography that I do Monday through Friday.
Gotcha.
But the pet photography I do on the weekends, and I have been doing it for about 5 years. And it's fun. I mean, I love animals. I do a lot of volunteer work, too, because occasionally someone who's fostering will come across me or come across the Heartspeak website, and I'm listed on there, and they'll see that I'm local. Next week, I have a foster shoot that I'm volunteering. It's more important to me that the animals have a better first impression, and maybe they'll get adopted sooner than it is to get paid for doing that. I'll definitely do that whenever I can do it.
After you have this great experience meeting another fellow photographer, how did the idea of a podcast come up for you?
Oh, that was a long time in the making. I mean, it wasn't even a thought in my head way back then. I started listening to podcasts. I am fortunate enough to be a photographer, so my work doesn't require me to write emails all day and things like that. So my work is very visual, so I'm able to listen to podcasts all day long if I want to.
Right.
I kind of dove into a bunch of podcasts, and then I heard other podcasters talk about how like now is the time to podcast, and it might have sparked a little something, but I'm like, no, that's not me. I can't do that. So I just was a listener for a really long time. I just thought to myself, well, there's not really that much out there about rescue. I mean, when I looked it up, there were a few podcasts here and there, but they were more like information about pets. If I did find something, it was kind of like haphazard, or maybe they didn't follow through or finish it, and it kind of trailed off. And to be completely honest, I didn't listen to any of them because I just wanted to see what was there, and I wanted to make my own way without copying anybody. So the spark was there, and then I would say it probably took a year to a year and a half for me to actually be like, okay, you know what? I can't get this out of my head, and I'm going to do it, because if it's just going to linger there until I do it, I have to. Lisa was the photographer from Heartspeak. It inspired me to be like, okay, well, if I share my stories about what I'm doing, maybe that'll inspire somebody else to go and do something. I knew so many people who would tell me so many stories that were inspiring. Everybody can tell a story about an animal in their life, and everybody has a different angle on it. And every dog has its own story. Every cat has its own story. And some of them are sad. I mean, there is a lot of sad stuff out there, but I kind of want to try and break those stereotypes that are out there about how rescue animals are just damaged goods, because I really think that like any animal can be a damaged good if they're mistreated.
Right.
They could be from the best breeder ever. I just wanted to share stories to kind of maybe connect with other animal lovers out there and make them realize that all animals need a home, and maybe kind of sway them into helping animals instead of fostering the breeders and the puppy mills.
Okay.
So I had to do something because I couldn't get it out of my head.
From idea to inspiration to actually doing a podcast, right? There's a few steps in between.
But there's also that resistance that lasts the longest, where you're just kind of daydreaming about it, but you have no intention to do it.
Yeah.
And when you put yourself out there in such a different way, and you're really vulnerable because you can't hear what people are thinking or wanting to say about you. So it's really scary. I had no hesitation that sharing stories about rescue would be a good thing. You know, I didn't need anybody to tell me that was a good idea. So I think eventually just the idea that maybe I could cause other people to think about what they're doing and take different actions and take action in general, that kind of overpowered all of my hesitations about, myself as a person.
Right. How did you kind of come up with your first few guests and episodes?
I just picked the people that I know well first, because I figured it'd be a whole lot easier to speak with someone that I did know, because I would be able to draw more of their story out if I already knew what the story was. So I started off with Lisa, obviously. Well, she was a few episodes in because she was pretty busy at the time, but I started off with her because she was my inspiration. And I got her in my third episode. One of the dogs I had photographed, his name was Robert. When I first met him, he's one of those dogs that you just look at and you say, he's just not going to get adopted because he's just too much to handle. He was a pit bull in a wheelchair, paralyzed from the waist down. A man was, walking by with him, and he saw me with my camera. I don't know if I was photographing another dog or in between dogs at the time. Stopped in the pen, and I was like, yeah, let me take a few pictures of Robert. Got to know the man who was walking him was someone who wanted to adopt him but couldn't, because Robert was not only paralyzed and in a wheelchair, but he also was not very good with other dogs. Joe had another dog at home. Joe actually just loved him so much that he came to Pets Alive every single day and ran with him. Like, he would go for a jog with him in his wheelchair. It was really inspiring to me that this man would just show up every single day for this dog that, might even get adopted by somebody else. But eventually it turned out that Joe did adopt Robert, and it was just such a happy moment. The first dog I ever fostered, it's like that's the hardest for me. She had no health problems. She just had to recover from, she just had a litter. She was engorged, and I had her for only a week and a half. And it just so happened that a friend of a friend saw me with her. I took her with me to pick up my boyfriend from work, and he fell in love with her, and he had been wanting a dog, and he decided, or actually his girlfriend surprised him because he wanted the dog and she had said no, and then she changed her mind and surprised him. So it was kind of a cool story because they both ended up wanting the dog, and he had no idea that she was adopting her. But I only had the dog for a week and a half, literally. And I was in tears the last 24 hours, crying like a little baby. I'm like, how do people do this? I don't know if I can do this anymore. Like, it was just a week and a half. That's it. But it does get easier. I cried for every single one of them. It's always a little bit hard, but then you know that they're going to someone that cares about them, and you also probably can visit them if they're not going too far away, or keep in touch on Facebook and get updates, and it's good.
Yeah.
It's a happy sadness.
Yeah, it's definitely, that's a perfect way to put it. Happy and sad at the same time. So a lot of your connections are through an organization called Pets Alive. You mentioned them on your interview episodes. Tell us a little bit about Pets Alive. Pets Alive
is really amazing. I don't even know how many acres they have on the property, but they take in all kinds of animals, not just dogs and cats. They take in horses. I don't know how many horses they have now, but they definitely have a few. They'll basically, they take farm animals in, and also dogs and cats and whatever they can help. And they're a no-kill shelter, so no matter who comes into their organization, they are not going to be euthanized. And unless they're very, very sick or something like that. But they have a no-kill philosophy, so I really, really respect that. They also have something that's unique I've never seen at any other rescue, is that their cat facility is not what you would typically see with like little cages. They have a cat house. They do have separate rooms for they have some semi-feral cats and they have some cats that have feline HIV. They can't be with other cats, obviously, because they'll spread it to them. So they have them in a separate room. And then they have, I want to say, 4 or 5 rooms. It's just so cool because you walk in and there might be 10 cats in that room and you can just interact with them. And I honestly don't even know. It's just amazing because it's like there's a house with all of these different things that they can climb up onto and all kinds of beds and couches, and it's just like a house that's for cats. For the dogs, like outdoor runs that are pretty spacey with dog houses and everything. So they use those, weather permitting, obviously. It's a really, really nice facility, and the people there are amazing. They honestly care about these animals. They definitely work way past the time that they're paid. I mean, they're late all the time to meet people that when they're getting a bunch of animals in, and they're really committed and they honestly care about the animals. It's really nice to know.
Going back to your podcast, if you were going to describe to folks, hey, Rebekah, tell me a little bit about your podcast. What should I expect when I listen to you?
I'm trying to turn it into something that's a little narrative rather than conversational. And I know I still have a really long way to go to get it to where I want it to be. But my influence for podcasting is a show called Snap Judgment, and their tagline is storytelling with a beat. At the moment, I really only just pop in some sound effects and some music to color the story. You don't hear an interview, you don't hear me asking people questions. You just hear their story. So it's really, really edited, and I'm kind of like the narrator. So I want to say it's more like an audiobook at this point than it is like a typical interview style podcast. Because I really want people to get involved in the story. I really want them to feel what the person's talking about, feel what the animal is going through. So, I mean, eventually I'd love to have music throughout the entire show, but I'm kind of experimenting here and there with music and sound effects and everything. But right now it's like a narrative storytelling podcast where you basically hear about rescue stories about cats and dogs. And I do definitely want to get some other people on here. I have a woman that I discovered who rescued 2 cows that escaped a slaughterhouse truck. They were on their way to a slaughterhouse and they escaped somehow because there was an accident, I think, and she rescued them. It's basically just stories. Any animals are welcome on the show. If anybody has a story that they want to share, I'm up for it. That's basically what it's about.
What has been so far your favorite episode?
My favorite episode has definitely been the one with Nina Wang. She is an artist, and she rescued a greyhound. And it's one of the typical who rescued who stories, because when she adopted Apollo, it was during a time in her life that she was really struggling to kind of find herself. Right. And she was really fearful of taking the next steps in life that she had to take. So her boyfriend saw that she was struggling and knew that animals cheered her up and said, hey, you know what? Why don't we just head on over to that greyhound rescue? Let's check them out. We don't have to adopt today, but it'll cheer you up. Let's go. She ended up adopting Apollo right on the spot because they fell in love with him. It was just so inspiring because this woman was going to Harvard and I think a year away from graduating, from getting her PhD.
Right. Unbelievable.
She just decided, you know what? I don't want my PhD. I'm wasting another year of my life if I do this. So I'm going to be an artist. At the same time, Apollo all he had ever known was a kennel and a racetrack. He didn't know what a house was like. Everything was a struggle for him. He had to learn how to sit on a couch because it was too squishy and scary for him. He had to learn how to walk up and down stairs. So it was just really inspiring that they kind of helped each other through their fears, taught each other how to just take life one moment at a time and, eventually overcome all those fears and challenges. So that was definitely my favorite story that I've gotten to put out there so far.
With Nina's episode, what made it so special, in my opinion, was that it started out with this, just like you said, this internal struggle, and then this dog interrupts her life, but instead of just being an interruption, it really kind of became definitely a integral part of her journey.
I was really nervous because I think she was only like the second person that I didn't know. I didn't know her personally. She was actually on another podcast that I listened to, which had really nothing to do with animals. It was about her when My Apollo came out. She had a Kickstarter, I think. So I was listening to a guy who talks about artists. She came on there. And so it was mentioned that she wrote a book about her rescue dog. So I had, written that down and gotten back to it. But I didn't know her personally. I kind of just had whatever was online to go from. So I was really excited. Also, that connection I have to her as an artist who is also fearful of kind of letting everything else go just to focus in on the stuff that matters. That was really inspiring to me too. So I resonated with both parts of the story.
Tell us a little about yourself, where you grew up, how'd you get into photography?
My parents are divorced, so I bounced back and forth between Lake Peekskill and Dover Plains. I went to school in Dover Plains for most of my education, and then I ended up graduating from Walter Panis, which is in, I don't even know where it is considered. I went to a few different schools. I went to college. That's kind of interesting, me figuring out that I wanted to be a photographer, because it's kind of funny how I'm 30 years old and everything is kind of coming together now. Like all of my passions are coming into one big passion. And I wish you could have just figured all this stuff out in the beginning, because my first ever job was working at a boarding kennel.
Oh, no kidding. Oh, my God.
Yeah. It was because I loved animals and I wanted to work with animals. But what happened was I started off working with the animals and then worked my way up to the office where I was then just answering the phone. So it turned from hanging out with animals really quickly into hanging out with neurotic people. So, but I mean, it was a great job and I loved the people that I worked with and the people who owned the place. I kind of, during that time, I wasn't going to college, because I thought that, like, I had no drive to go to school. I didn't know what I wanted to do. So I was just working. And then I was like, you know what? Why don't I just go back to school for photography? So that's what I did. I started going to Westchester Community College with a focus in visual arts, which was mostly photography courses. And then I photographed a wedding, and it was like the most horrible experience of my life.
Oh, okay. This was your first wedding ever, or
my first
wedding?
And only wedding. Yeah, and it was like for a friend, so that might have been why it was like so challenging to like kind of like be a guest and be a photographer at the same time. It was just like a mess. I mean, the photos came out okay. It was just not for me, and at that time I thought that was what I was going into photography for, and that's how I was going to make money, and I didn't really, what's the word I'm looking for? I just gave up. I was like, well, if I can't do this, I probably shouldn't be a photographer. And so then I transferred over to SUNY Purchase and switched my major from visual arts to journalism, because I really like to write.
Okay.
And that was another huge mistake. Like after my first journalism class, I like went to my car and cried, and I was like, you know what? I'm just going to get a bachelor's degree. It doesn't matter. I'm not switching anything. I'm just going to do it. So I did. I tried to find work as a writer, but I didn't really like writing journalism stuff. And I just I bartended and waitressed for a long time. And then I picked up my camera again, and I was like, you know what? Maybe I can do something with this. Right. And that's when I started to think of other options. I'm like, you know what? I don't have to do weddings. I can probably do something else. So I printed a flyer one day, 50 copies of a flyer that said I would basically do anything except for weddings. And I ended up finding myself at dog parks. I just was handing them out at dog parks. So I ended up getting my first pet photo sessions of mainly dogs. And I did a couple families and like some senior portraits. Then I realized, I'm like, hey, maybe I can just be a pet photographer. At the same time, I also had become an assistant at Consumer Reports, a photo assistant. I was doing a lot of product photography work, or learning a lot about product photography at the same time that I was trying to get involved in the pet photography and starting to volunteer. So it all kind of ended up blending together, and now I'm freelance, but I call myself a freelance full-timer because I'm there like Monday through Friday most of the time.
How long was your break from photography?
I guess I did kind of evolve my photography, but then I was strictly treating it as a hobby, and treating it as a hobby to the point where I just shot on auto. Like I didn't even want to learn anything about it anymore. After I gave up on the coursework of photography, I still took one photojournalism class at Purchase. That was the only photo class I took there. But it actually inspired me to go and get a DSLR, because before that I was shooting film. And when I realized that they had digital bodies now that did the same stuff,
right.
I was intrigued and I was like, oh, I got to get one of these. So I got like a consumer grade one. And like I said, for the first 4 or 5 years I had it, probably, I just shot on auto and I didn't do anything with it. So when I picked it up again, I kind of had to like relearn everything that I had learned earlier and be like, okay, there's shutter speed and aperture. What do those do now?
So now you got photography, you got the podcast, you have animals. Are those truly your passions?
I definitely love photography and I love the animals and I love doing my pet photo sessions when I do get to do them. I'm not crazy about doing the product photography, but I am really grateful for it because it taught me so much about lighting and other things like that, that now I'm able to kind of apply to the work that I do on this side. So I really like actually creating art as well. I do a lot of close-up photography and flower photography, and I experiment with a lot of different things. My most recent series I called Life's a Blur, and it was everything in it had a blurred background, and it was blurred with camera blur, not, by going into Photoshop and blurring it. Sure. So I like to do a lot of that stuff, and how I'm trying to connect my art to my pet photography, because obviously when you look at it, it's a totally different genre. Any art that anybody buys from me results in a donation to HeartSpeak, and anybody who either gets a pet photo session or buys one of my pet photos, like if they have a vet's office or something where they need animal photos to be hung up, those profits benefit Pets Alive. So right now, 10% of my profits go to these organizations, but eventually, step by step, I'm going to bring the 10% all the way up to 50% of my profits, because if I can live this amazing life that I'm dreaming of right now, I want them to benefit too. And I'm totally willing to give half of my profits to the organizations that I really care about in order to help them. That's my whole story.
Can you talk a little bit more about great photography can actually help animal rescue?
Totally. Regular volunteers at rescues are just so inundated with work, with all of the regular day-to-day stuff that has to get done, the cleaning, the answering phone calls, answering emails, and all that stuff. Sometimes they can't really focus their energy on taking a great photo. So a lot of times you'll go to these rescues and online and you'll see these photos of dogs that make them look kind of scared or sad, or maybe they're in a run and it doesn't really portray them the best way that you can portray them.
It's actually kind of depressing, right? To see some of these photos.
And, it's funny because I've had people kind of go the other way and tell me, well, people feel bad for them if they see them like that and then they'll want to adopt them. I'm like, that's not really how it is. They might feel bad for them and not want to look at it anymore and click out of it. And I think that the majority of people will do that. They don't want to look at that. They don't want to look at a sad, pitiful dog. If you have any interest in photography at all, you don't have to be a professional. You could even use your iPhone. You don't even need a camera. Just take a dog outside for a walk. Take them in a little fenced-in yard if there's one on the property, and just get them on the grass. Get a picture of them outside of that run where they look, so sad and dark. And I really feel that giving these animals a better first impression, it's not just my opinion. It's been proven. HeartSpeak has proven. I've heard countless stories from other HeartSpeak members where adopters have actually reached out to these photographers and said, this is amazing. I saw this photo and I have to thank you, because if you didn't take this photo, I might not have met my dog. And so people see these photos that look better than the average photo, and they have a better first impression, and they're more likely to go and adopt that animal. Better photography sells better. It's just common sense. Right. If you have a more upbeat, happy photo of an animal, they just look better to the average adopter. And those are the photos that are going to grab the most attention. And if a rescue has better photography overall for all of their animals, they're going to have more adoptions.
Yeah. Any other kind of tricks of the trade? I mean, I think in the episode you even mentioned, they experimented with different color backgrounds and all that. Yeah. Can you give any tips to that amateur pet photographer?
Definitely. And I just want to mention, first of all, that there's a field guide on the HeartSpeak website. It's heartspeak.org, and that's with 2 S's. So it's hearts with an S and then speak.org. And they have a field guide. I think it's only like $20. And it's really cool because it's the paper on it. It's kind of like plasticky. So it's really durable for bringing it to the shelter. It's not going to get ripped up. It tells you everything about using a camera. And even, I think, like, I just got a new phone, and I can even adjust some of the settings that I can adjust on my real camera on my phone. So it really dives into the best settings and the best ways to capture an animal.
That's awesome.
So definitely look into that and just maybe get one for your shelter that everybody can kind of look at and learn from. Different color backgrounds are really great because they stand out even better than taking the dog outside on the grass, because that's kind of a typical thing. You know, you see dogs out on the grass all the time. They don't really stand out. They're definitely an improvement, but colored backgrounds really do wonders because they just pop from, like, if you're scrolling through your Facebook feed and you see a pink background or a blue background or a purple, yellow, anything that's bright and colorful, you're going to stop and be like, hey, what's that? So yeah, that's a good tip. And you don't need real background paper. You can just buy some sheets, you know, at a department store and use that.
Sure. Angles. Is it better to photograph a dog from maybe up high or down low or sort of eye level? What's your opinion on that?
When I was first learning about pet photography, the first thing that I learned is that you should not look down on them. But I've kind of broken that rule a lot. So, I mean, it really depends. If you can get, look, I'm going to just assume everyone is using their phone. And in that case, you definitely want to get on the dog's level, because your phone is like a little bit wider. And when you're shooting wide angle, it kind of distorts them and makes them look a little bit funny. So you want to get a little further away from them, maybe zoom in on them. So if you can get somebody to help you, like get someone to hold the dog for you, you are further away from the dog and get down low on their level, it makes them look a little more important. Even if you look up at them a little bit, you know, get right on the ground on your stomach and, you know, look up at them, it gives them a more regal perspective, and they pop, and they just, it's a different perspective that you don't often see, because we do often kind of just take a picture from our height, which is double the height of the pets usually.
Sure.
Definitely experiment with that a lot. I mean, you're going to kind of find what you like to do as you play around, but yeah, try and get low for your angles.
That's really powerful. You go online and you literally have a half a second to make a first impression. And it's always through the photo. So
I've never had an experience in a kill shelter. And Lisa was telling me when they did this for HeartSpeak, they did something called the Perfect Exposure Project. And they go into high intake shelters that have to euthanize a large portion of the animals because they are state run and they have to take every animal that comes in, and they only have so much room.
Sure.
So she told me that there was just a line, like a block or two long, of people giving up their animals. Of course, that got me furious, and I'm like, oh, well, I can't believe that people would do that. She's like, well, you don't know the situation. You don't know what's going on in their lives. And I was like, but the animal's going to get killed. And she's like, but you can't demonize people because that doesn't solve any problems. It doesn't. Maybe you don't want everybody to adopt an animal. Some people should not have animals because at the first sign of trouble, they're going to bring them to a shelter and that animal might be euthanized. So it's really important also to educate people on proper pet care and what's involved, because I think also that sometimes people adopt or buy their pets not knowing like how much care is actually involved. So to teach people this ahead of time so that maybe, you know, they won't get that animal and put them into that situation is also a good thing. Education all around and sharing stories, I think, is what we all can be a part of. It's not hard to share our stories.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. How do people find you? How do people find Rebekah Nemethy?
I'm a .net girl, so I have 2 websites. One of them is reflectivephotos.net, and that's where my photography, both my pet photography and my art is. You can find my podcast at myrescuerocks.net, and you can find it on iTunes as well, or you can just stream every episode right from the homepage. So that's the future of My Rescue Rocks.
We want to say thank you to Rebekah Nemethy for sharing her story. If If you want to see some of her artwork, including her beautiful pet photography, go to our show notes at thisispawprint.com/15. You can also see links to her episodes where she interviews Lisa Prince Fischler, Joe Nip and the pit bull Robert, as well as Nina Huang and the greyhound Apollo. If you want to learn more about me and Nancy, we promise we don't bite. You can look us up on Facebook, Harold Ree or Nancy Ree. You can also look us up on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram. Look for This Is Pawprint, one word. If you want to hear more of our episodes, you can check us out on iTunes, SoundCloud, or Stitcher. And finally, we just want to say thank you to all of our listeners out there. We just got some new listeners from Prince Edward Island in Canada, Lebanon, and Vietnam. Always remember that you all send a positive message of love and peace by saving an animal. Have a great day, and see you next time on Pawprint.
Pawprint is a production of EVER Education.
You can't handle the truth.
Woohoo!